You're listening to the Breakaway Wealth podcast, the show that helps you build wealth faster, think outside the box, and break out of the herd. Here's your host, Jim Oliver.
Welcome back, Breakaway Wealth. I'm your host, Jim Oliver, and with me today, one of our most active members in the Breakaway community and one of our best clients that is always looking for more freedom in the United States and in the world. And welcome, Nathan. Welcome. How are you, Nathan?
I'm doing wonderful today. How about yourself, Jim?
I'm doing great. And audience, I'm going to have Nathan introduce himself here in just a second and just tell everybody a little bit about him. And we're doing something a little different today. Instead of me interviewing Nathan and what have you done with your infinite banking system, we're gonna, this is a brand new first episode of this type, but it's really questions for Jim Oliver, right? So Nathan's gonna ask me some questions live. We have not rehearsed this. We have no idea what the questions are. And we're going to answer questions live on the podcast. So Nathan, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Jim. So my name is Nathan. I work on my own business as Moonstruck Land Management. I come from a little bit different background than most people in this field. I do wildlife and forestry. So I'm a wildlife and forestry professional. I went to school for it. And a lot of my questions and the way that I use my policy is based upon that goal and that career path. So I'm not really a traditional businessman, but I am using it to start my business in a field that is still brand new and try to figure out how to use it to help private landowners and students who are coming out of college with my background.
I love that. And you know, a couple of things come to mind when you say what you just said and introduce yourself is one, I hope a lot of people know that Nelson Nash was a forester and, went to school for the same thing. And that's how he was trained. And so one of the reasons that infinite banking is explained the way that it's explained. And honestly, the reason that it came about is because God saw so fit to have Nelson trained as a forester so he would think long term. And one of Nelson's pillars of infinite banking is to think long term. So the other thing that comes to mind is in the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, George Clausen, he talks about invest in what you know, right? And so
Absolutely.
Again, that's exactly what you're saying is, hey, and everybody should do this, is you invest in what you know. And that's exactly what you said. So thank you for sharing those two things. An audience that gives you kind of a good perspective of where Nathan's coming from.
Absolutely.
So Nathan, let's jump in.
Well, ironically enough, the fact that Nelson Nash was a forester gave me the initial spark to look into this. I actually heard about Create Tailwind and infinite banking probably about 10 years ago, 15 years ago when Ron Paul was running for office. There was a reporter that kept talking about this new banking type of policy, not realizing it was actually hundreds of years old, but not really well known.
Yeah.
He kept talking about it, and I just didn't think it sounded too good to be true. So I just kind of put it to the side. And then when I was in my first technician job, I started looking at some of the old content and I looked into it and I was like, this stuff really has a great application for the field that I'm in. Let me look into it deeper. And being that I also had some of an investment mindset, I wanted to really dive into it. And Jim here and then his son Tanner really helped me understand it fully. They gave me the book, Become Your Own Banker. And after reading that book, it just kind of clicked. Everything made sense. And I started using it for my own career path. And my hope was to introduce others from the biology field, hopefully to kind of improve the quality of research and improve their ability to better themselves before they start making those big leaps into government positions.
That's awesome. All right, man, let's dive in and start off with the first question.
Absolutely. So the first question comes into, for somebody just starting or finishing the education, what kind of advantage does this infinite banking life insurance policy have for somebody just getting started in the career?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the way that I would answer that question is it starts to clarify for you what's more important and what the goal is. Because when you get out of school, let's just say you're getting out of college, right? And if you don't go to college, then you're getting out of high school. It doesn't matter. When you're done with your, quote, formal education and in my opinion, your real education starts, right?
Absolutely.
Is you start to decide what you're going to educate yourself about. But we're told that the goal is to save money and build up a nest egg that someday we're going to live off of for the rest of our lives. And then we're going to hope that we don't run out of money. That's path A. That's what they teach you, right? If you came out of school, you start infinite banking, and you realize that your need for banking and your need for finance is much greater than your need for investment, and that the goal is not a nest egg, right? That
Absolutely.
it's cash flow. You come out of school and you realize that, and you start to build that. I don't care if you're putting $1,000, $5,000, whatever it is. If you took all of your money that you got from graduation, whatever it is, and you started putting it into your own banking system. If you had student loans, you started taking over those student loans to where you stop paying interest to someone else. Because the problem that we're trying to all solve, whether we're 20, 60, 80, is that we finance every single thing that we buy. We either pay somebody else interest or we give up interest that we could have earned somewhere else, creating lost opportunity costs. And if you understood those two things, cash flow is king, lost opportunity costs, and how infinite banking makes all of that possible, it's really like your wealth engine to drive those things, right? To use a good analogy for your field is, if you had a lumber yard, then you just have a lumber yard, right? You're just storing wood. It has value, sure. But if you had a lumber yard and then right next to it, you had a paper mill, you could actually print money, right? I mean,
You print paper, sell it for money.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. You're gonna print paper and then sell it for money. And it's that. But you need that insurance contract with infinite banking so that you have a money pool so that you can go out and do those all those different projects that you have, whether you're a forester, whether you're a doctor, whether you're an attorney, whether you're a business owner, real estate investor, hard money lender. It's infinite, like Nelson said.
And one of the things that relates to my personal experience is I thought, how much better off would I have been if I had started this policy 10 years ago when I had first heard about it? And when I wanted to start building my business, I would have had my own finances to finance my equipment, my tractors and things that I wanted to use to be a better service to the community. Instead of having to pay the interest to somebody else, I would have been paying it back to myself. And also being a student at one point, I thought of, even if I was the child of somebody who was more focused on investment, you can get a policy for your child and then take over their student loans when they get out of college. And that way they're not paying money to some bank that they don't ever see again, but that money gets reinvested into their life, into the future. They'll get to the point where they won't have to take jobs based upon how much it pays. They can take jobs based upon the experience it gives them to better themselves and become more knowledgeable in whatever field they want to jump into. Internships are like that a lot. You have unpaid internships, and many times people can't afford to do them, so they don't take them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and what I always think about is what we're really teaching people is control, right? And whoever controls the money makes the money. If you're in control, then you're really free. When you're not free is when you're not in control. And, sometimes, Nathan, people when they're in their early 20s, they're not sure they really want to have that total freedom because they just don't have the confidence quite yet. And that's why young people are rioting and doing these things like, I want the government to do this and this and this, but I don't want the government to do that. But I want the government to do this and I don't want them to do that. And it's like, you're just not sure. And as you get older and you realize, all I really want is the government to stay out of my pocketbook and give me the freedoms. And yes, the protections, but you also realize that you have the freedom to protect yourself. So,
Correct.
All right, next question.
Next question is, you spoke before about the potential disadvantages of starting multiple policies at the same time. And I'm sure you can touch upon that a little bit, but are there any advantages to starting multiple policies at the same time? And this is going to lead into my next question as well, but can you have an advantage of starting multiple policies at the same time?
Yeah, I think that you can have an advantage of starting multiple policies, and everybody does infinite banking a little bit different. I mean, in the very beginning, I had a policy that I just used for cars, right? And that was the size of the policy. It was perfect because about every 3 years when it seemed like I was buying a new car, it had about the right amount of money in it to use to buy that car. At the time I was married, so we had 2 cars or 3 cars or whatever it was, depending. So sometimes people like to have a policy designed for each thing. Maybe you have a policy designed just for real estate investments, policy designed for hard money lending, etc. The only danger is when there are people out there that want you to, quote, stack policies. And what I mean by that, Nathan, is you take out a $100,000 premium policy. And I just use 100,000 because it makes the percentages easy to see. And let's just say you had $60,000 of cash in there, and you take 50,000 of that cash and you fund another policy. So then on that $50,000 cash, you have $30,000 of available cash, and you take that 25,000 of that and you start another policy.
Gotcha.
All at the same time, maybe on different people, maybe with different companies. So the company doesn't know what you're doing, because this is what people do. Okay. I'm not advocating for this. All of those things actually work, because we know once it starts to leverage, you're good. Right. And really, there's only cash drag really in the first year. Every year after that, it's either just about even or better. And then once it's better, then this thing would work if one thing doesn't happen. And that's your income doesn't change and you're not able to fund the policies, right? As long as you're able to fund the policies, it's fine. I see the power of it, but it's dangerous. I would say it's kind of like, I would never recommend anybody do premium financing, which is where you go get the money from the bank to pay the premium and you just pay the interest. I would never recommend anybody do that unless you have at least about a $15 million net worth, meaning that no matter what, you're going to be able to pay those premiums.
Wow.
And no matter what, you're going to be able to pay that interest to that bank. And both of those concepts are dangerous, because if something goes the wrong direction, interest rates, your income, some things that you're not in control of, those things can blow up. And when we design policies and we design a plan for people, I always say, I can design this two ways: where failure is or isn't an option. Which way would you like it? And if they say anything other than, I want to design where failure isn't an option, then I question whether this is the right client for me.
I understand. So in my personal situation, this leads into the next question. If somebody wanted to gift a policy to a person that is currently the insured person, are there any tax disadvantages? And the reason being is, in my own personal experience, being the oldest child of my family, I also have a mindset where I want to take care of the rest of my family. My policies were smaller. I wasn't maxing out my income to one large policy. It was small policies. And my hope was, once they started to cash flow, to gift them to my siblings so they can start their own banking system without having to drag. At the same time, I wanted to make sure there wasn't any tax penalties for such a thing. How do you navigate that?
So with insurance, as long as you only have two entities. So like, let's say that they were the insured, you were the owner and beneficiary. So just two, right? Then you can transfer that policy to them, the ownership of that policy. You could transfer the beneficiary to someone else, but you can't make the beneficiaries their children, they'll say, you the owner and them the insured. It has to be two.
Gotcha.
So when you set the policy up, as long as you didn't violate that two entity rule, then you're fine. Awesome. And no tax consequences.
That's fantastic to hear. Okay, so now switching gears a little bit, this is a question going into Nelson Nash's background.
Love it.
Nelson obviously was a believer, and a lot of the things that he talked about was integrated with the Bible and the biblical principles. How does the life insurance structure fall into line with the biblical principles of leaving an inheritance to your generational wealth, to your children and children's children?
Yeah, I mean, the Bible says it, the way that the Bible says it is, a good man leaves an inheritance, right? And I think that we really have to dive into what inheritance means. To me, Nathan, one of the things that I think is so important, and what Nelson, his inheritance, or what he passed down as an inheritance, the people that were outside his family, like me, was knowledge and clarity of the problem that we're solving, right? So for instance, if you teach your children, Nelson's dream, and I believe he accomplished this, was for his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, never to have to go into a commercial bank for a loan ever in their lives, right? And
that's awesome.
So that inheritance is much greater than a dollar amount. But let's look at it from the traditional sense too, is when you do infinite banking, you will buy more death benefit than you would ever buy if you were just out there buying death benefit, right?
Yes.
Because you want your bank to be as big as possible. And when I used to do this whole analysis of, Nathan, how much life insurance death benefit do you need? Well, based on your human life value, or based on your capital needs analysis, based on all of these different systems, right? And then somebody one day said to me, you know how much life insurance you need is the maximum that an insurance company will give you, right? And because the insurance company is not going to give you more than they see that your life is worth, right? Economic. And there were companies that would represent plane crashes and victims in plane crashes, and they would figure out your human life value. I mean, there's firms, law firms just to do that. Or in an accidental death, right? Like, how much was your life worth? And they would base it on your age and your income and your potential and your education and all of those things, not your heart, not your hustle, not your persistence, all the things that really matter, but it would be like on paper, right? So, but the most that somebody would give you. So, but with infinite banking, we find that people get kind of, quote, maxed out on death benefit because of controlling the cash. So to me, the inheritance, whatever it is, and by the way, if you decide, hey, I'm not going to give my kids $1, but I'm going to teach them how to do this on their own, and all of this money is going to go into a trust or a charity or your church or your synagogue, you get to decide that,
I
right?
was going to ask that.
Yeah, but either way, the death benefit is tax-free. So again, tax-free versus taxable, depending on your tax bracket, the state you live in, all of those factors, it could be up to 50%. So if you had $2 million of death benefit and it was compared to $2 million of assets that you were passing down, you can see that it's a big difference, could be half, up to half. And if you get really big, where you have a state tax, right? You worked your whole life, pay tax on all of this money, and then the government wants to take half of your money again because of a state tax, right? I mean, these are the things that happen every single day. So I would say that every principle in the Bible that talks about money, infinite banking is in alignment with. Nathan, I think you know this, but when Nelson would get up in front of a crowd, and there was a crowd, a full room, to hear him speak for 10 hours, right? Today, it seems like with our ADHD, it doesn't seem like that's possible anymore. But he would get up there and he would say, before I start, I want you to know that everything I'm going to teach you today, everything I'm going to talk about, and he'd hold up his Bible, and my Bible is right there, but it's out of reach, is through the lens of this book. And so every principle, it's one of the things that I love about infinite banking is it aligns 100% with the Bible. And in my life, in my experience, when I'm in alignment with the Bible, all I get is abundance and I don't get any scarcity. When I'm not in alignment, when I'm resisting, then scarcity comes in, the enemy comes in, doubt comes in, and confusion and chaos. But when I'm in alignment, nothing but abundance.
You know, it's amazing that some people don't realize just how true that is and how often we disregard the benefits you have from just being in line with the Bible, because it's tried and true for couple thousands of years, that however long the book has been written for, those principles have held true civilization after civilization. But even if you don't have the Christian or a religious mindset and just have a secular mindset, and you don't have any kids to pass anything to, or you're not thinking about kids yet because you're so young from college, this really does help solve the problem of giving money to organizations, NGOs that are really trying to push and benefit the world that you're trying to produce in the future, such as saving wildlife, saving forestry, saving endangered zones. How much better would it be if they had the funding to do those things, setting aside land for specific species that you're trying to help out? So that's where I think this comes into play.
I love that. And I just had a real life example of this last week, Nathan, is I had a friend come to me, and they're involved in a charity for special needs kids, happens to be based in Minnesota. So right now, the government is shutting down funding the charities in Minnesota because of the lack of oversight from the state on these so-called charities in some communities in Minnesota, right? I don't think we have to spell it out, but I think everybody knows what we're talking about. And so now these special need kids could suffer in 90 days from now unless they get some kind of bridge loan. Now, I believe it'll get worked out within 90 days. I hope it will. But I think about somebody with special needs. Okay. If you have, when I don't know, 25 years ago, I used to do a lot of planning for families with special needs because you're going to take care of your child until you graduate from this world, right? No doubt about it. But God forbid you get hit by a truck or when you die, who's going to take care of that child? Well, when you have a tax-free check coming to whoever it is, it's going to make it easier. Okay. Even God forbid it's an institution or something like that. You might be able to hire somebody, I mean, I don't know. Every situation is a little bit different. But my point is that death benefit's going to come in there. Well, what if we could have that death benefit umbrella or that parachute someday that we know it's going to take care of, but we also got to use the cash while we were alive. And we got to use the cash to build other wealth, to build other stability, to build and keep your life, right? While you're taking care of, and if that child doesn't need that care because you have all these other assets, then guess what? The death benefit can go to a charity or your church or whatever, like you just said. So I think if you have anybody out there that in the audience that is got a special needs child that you take care of, or that's where your heart is for those kinds of charities, infinite banking is amazing.
Yeah. And if somebody's not familiar with finances and how this all works, they might not understand and grasp the concept of why it's called infinite banking.
Yeah.
But when you really start seeing how these policies feed into your life, which allows you to build more wealth, which puts back into the policy, it snowballs quick. It really does. And
it's amazing.
That's actually segueing into my last question. And this is for somebody who might not be familiar with finances. But how does someone order a copy of the Becoming Your Own Banker book or another book that might be helpful? And which books would you recommend to somebody who has not already been exposed to the world of finance and investing in business?
Yeah. So if somebody were coming to me, like you said, somebody that's brand new to kind of finance, everything else, is I would definitely read Becoming Your Own Banker first. Okay. Then I would read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, only because you're going to make this one paradigm shift from that book. And it's a big one. And it's what I said earlier, is the goal is not accumulating money in an account in an instrument that's going down in value as the government debases our money every single day. Okay. What I mean by that is they're printing money, which means the dollars in your pocket are going down in value. So that's a negative force against you. Then you have taxes, then you have fees, then you have expenses, then you have risk, then you have all of these things against you pushing you down. Make that one shift of no matter what your education is. I don't care if you have a PhD, I don't care if you have an MD, anything else. And I don't care if you got a high school education, it's cash flow and buying assets, because assets, when the government prints more money, which they're going to, go up in value, right? And you can raise your rents or prices, any of that stuff. So those are the first two books. The other thing is that, and not to toot my own horn, but this book that we are just about ready to release, like literally in the next 30 days. And Nathan and some other people have gotten a copy of the book already, the pre-publication, is ownership. And it's so important to change your mindset to being the owner of your life. And I touched on this earlier, but I know everybody wants to be, we're told the customer's great, right? We're told being the customer satisfaction, customer service, customer this, but that's not where wealth lies. Wealth lies in being the owner of your life and being in control. And so if you're nervous about being in control, it's only because you haven't educated yourself enough. But there's 5 shifts in this book, ownership, that will help you take ownership of your life. So those 3 books. And then the last book that I would recommend has nothing to do with finance. It has everything to do with mindset, and it's The Magic of Thinking Big. And Nathan, I just believe that we don't think big enough. We don't visualize big enough. And I'll give you a perfect example. I grew up very poor. J.D. Rockefeller grew up very poor, right? He envisioned being the richest man in the world. I envisioned being rich, wealthy, but not the richest man in the world. He had a bigger vision than me. Did he become the richest man in the world? He did. Did I become what I thought in my head was wealthy? I did. But if I would have thought bigger, then I would have had bigger. I'm so grateful for my life. I'm not saying it, but the magic of thinking big. And he gives you some things in there. And he gives you really 4 things in there, but I'm going to share 2. One is, he says, action cures fear. So if you're afraid of taking control of your finance, you're afraid of being the owner of your life, the only thing you can do is take action, which means read a book, do this, do this, do this. The other thing is be a front seater, right? And what I mean by that is if you have questions, sit in the front of the room and raise your hand.
Yeah.
Just
Very important.
ask questions. Don't worry about whether somebody, like, when I was a kid, I was not a good student. I never wanted to ask questions. I never did ask questions because when I was a kid, I was a bad stutterer. So I knew that I would stutter and the kids would giggle or whatever. And I'd get mad and then I'd probably knock the crap out of somebody. And at recess, that was just the way it was. And so I wouldn't ask questions and I wasn't curious, right? And I was curious, but I wouldn't ask the question. And as I gained confidence, I started asking questions and I got more and more and more curious, and it made all the difference in the world by raising my hand and being a front seater. So those 2 things, and you can never think big enough, right? So that's what those are the books that I would read. And I promise you, if you take the whatever number of hours that would be, depending on how fast you read, and I'm not a fast reader, it will be worth it. If you read those 4 books and you say, man, that was a waste of my time. Anybody in the audience, you call me or email me and I'll donate $5,000 to your favorite charity for the time that you spent.
That's amazing. But I don't think they're going to have the ability to honestly do that, because once you read those books, except for the mindset one, because I have not read that book yet, but I can say about the ones that you did mention that I have read, they have all been valuable to my mindset. And I think I would add the one that you mentioned earlier too, The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yeah.
My dad gave me a copy of that when I was 13 years old.
Love it.
And I did not read it because I'm like, Dad, what is this book? It looks stupid. It looks old. And then when I started working with infinite banking systems and stuff, and you kept mentioning this book over and over again, I'm like, well, I think I still have a copy of that. I pulled that out. I'm like, why did I not read it? What my dad gave me when I was younger.
Yeah. Nathan, you know what's funny about that book? When I was a financial planner, okay, and I thought all the things that I was doing wrong looking back and, charging people 1%, I was a money babysitter, not, really paying attention to actual rate of return and just telling everybody average rate of return, is I handed out those books. I used to buy them for $1.99 a piece, buy a case of them, I would hand them out. And one of my goals was to hand out 2 books every single day. I would go to my office. I had to go to the office every day. It was, back old school, had to wear the tie, everything else. And I would get 2 books and I would go out and do my day and whatever appointments I had, I would hand out those books. And one of the things that I love is that when they're sitting up there on the hill and they're saying, hey, we're about the same age. We've made about the same amount of money, but you have so much more than we do. Right? He was the owner and he paid himself first. He stuck to his pillars and his tenets of the book. And I'm not going to give away the tenets because I'm the type of person, if somebody told me what they are, then I won't go read the book. So I want you to go read the book, audience. So I'm not going to tell you what they are. But one of them is pay yourself first. Okay. Don't get caught up in all the noise and all of the, it was just in my devotional today don't get caught up in the noise. Put on your armor of God so that you are protected from the noise, from the corruption, from all of those things out there in the human world. All right, Nathan.
That was fantastic.
That was fun. I mean, this is, thank you for being part of the first episode. And audience, give us some feedback of what you want to see. What I don't want to do, audience, anymore is I don't want you to ever turn on the show on a Tuesday when we release it and go, oh, Jim's interviewing another person that I just, I'm not connecting with. I mean, we're going to talk about real life things. People are going to ask any question they want to ask. They got to ask it about infinite banking, about health, about wealth, about anything, adversity. I mean, anything that they think I can answer the question to. And I promise you, there's not a question you can ask about IBC that I can't answer. And I'm not saying that out of arrogance. I say that with all the humility in the world because Nelson taught me and my friends, Justin Kraft, Joe Pantozzi, I could go on and on and on of friends that out there that have influenced me and taught me things about infinite banking. But if I were your calculus professor, you would expect me to be able to answer any question about calculus that you could come up with. And so Nathan, thank you so much for being on here. And audience, Thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of that today. And Nathan talked about it, mindset. So we're going to wrap this up like we always do with the incredible words of Earl Nightingale and the incredible secret. The incredible secret. The strangest secret is what you think about, you'll become. Until next time, thank you, audience.
Here's the key to success and the key to failure. We become what we think about. Now let me say that again. We become what we think about.
Thanks for listening to the Breakaway Wealth podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this show wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If you want to start increasing your wealth building ability right now, go to community.createtailwind.com to join our free online community and get access to free, in-depth training designed to help you build real, lasting wealth. See you next week.